Are you a student in a photography or media course in college? If so, it's great to have you here. If you're into wildlife photography, particularly of birds, then that is even better, as this video topic discusses how to edit a wildlife photo and learn about some of the settings in Lightroom in the process. Let's get started. You yourself may have taken a lot of wildlife photos and you really want to edit them to your liking, but you're not too sure how to go about it. I've got you covered there. Now, before we get started, I do want to preface this that you don't need to have access to really high quality equipment and high cost equipment. For example, the equipment that I use is this simple little Panasonic Lumix FZ80, which has a great 60 times optical zoom lens, a 20 to 1200 millimeter equivalent. Another great thing about this camera, which is the other thing that you really need, is raw photo function. So not only does it have a really long zoom, perfect for capturing faraway wildlife, it also has raw photo functionality, which is particularly what you need if you're going to be editing your photos after the fact. The tripod that I use is a simple Sirui Traveler. It's very, very light, made of carbon fiber. It's built sturdily and it is very, very easy to use. Now, these two pieces of kit only cost around £360 altogether. I got this camera for around £250. You can probably buy it for way less than that now. And I got this for roughly £110. You also don't need to have access to really out there locations. If you have a back garden with a bird feeder set up, or you have a local park that has a forest in it, that is more than enough. You can still capture some amazing looking pictures there. So anyway, you've taken your photos, you've offloaded them onto your computer or your laptop, and you've imported them into Lightroom, but you're not quite sure how to get started on the editing process. Don't worry, I've got you covered. The first thing that you're going to want to do is open up Lightroom and select the photo that you intend to edit. I'm going to be editing this one of a robin that I captured in a local forest very near where I live. The first thing I always do when starting a new photo edit is auto edit the photo. So first, click on the Light tab and then click on the Auto button. Now, what this allows Lightroom to do is it allows it to automatically scan over your photo and detect what it perceives as the best settings for it. So now you can see after we've clicked that button, there are a lot of settings that have been changed to what it perceives as the best settings for your photo. And now, the most effective foundation for a photo edit is to play around with the light settings and really fine-tune what you want your photo to look like. So first, click on the Light tab. You will then see a number of different controls on the side here. Exposure changes how bright or dark your overall picture is. Moving this value up makes your picture brighter, and moving it down makes it darker. Contrast changes the contrast between the light and dark areas of your picture. The higher the value, the darker your darks and the lighter your lights, and the opposite is true for lower values. So the lighter your darks and the darker your lights. Highlights is quite self-explanatory. Turning this value up increases the highlights in your image, making them pop out more, and turning it down decreases the highlights. Shadows is also quite self-explanatory. Either brighten the shadowed areas by increasing the value or darken them by decreasing it. Whites sets the white point of the image. Moving this value up makes the brightest color values brighter, and moving it down makes the brightest color values darker. Finally, we have blacks here at the bottom. Moving this value up makes the darkest color values brighter, and moving it down makes the darkest color values darker. So, now that we know what each of the light functions do, it's time to start editing our photo. So for the exposure here, I'm going to turn it up to 0.47. This is just to establish kind of a baseline exposure for the image and how it will look in final. For the contrast, personally, I like my pictures to be quite punchy in their contrast. I like them to be very contrasty, so I'm going to turn this value up quite a bit to 37. I also like my highlights in my image to be quite punchy as well. This helps to add to the contrast rather than take away from it. So I'm going to turn the highlights up to a value of 44. And with my shadows, I'm also going to bring them up because with how they are right now, they would be quite crushed in the final image. So I'm going to move this value up to 33. You can see that the shadows look much better now. For the whites, I think the white value is okay, so I'm just going to leave it at 0. And now, finally for the blacks, I'm going to turn this value down to -20, simply because this helps to further increase the contrast in the image. Now that we're done editing the light settings, it's time to move on to color settings. So firstly, click on the color tab, and down here you will see a lot of different other settings that all pertain to color this time. Temperature refers to how cool or warm the light in your image appears. Turning up this value makes the image appear warmer or more orange, and turning it down makes the image appear cooler or more blue. Tint refers to magenta or green light within your image. Turn this value up for more magenta, turn it down for more green. Vibrance changes the saturation of the image without oversaturating it. Again, up for more and down for less. And finally here we have saturation. You generally want to be more conservative with this setting, as turning it all the way down will make your photo completely black and white, and turning it up will lead to some strange color banding, especially in the later stages of your image, whenever you're changing more complex things. So you generally want to be quite conservative with this. Next up is the color mix. This setting allows you to change the hue, saturation, and luminance of specific colors without affecting other colors in the image. Red, orange, yellow, green, light blue, dark blue, purple, and pink. Finally, we have the color grading wheels. These allow you to add a hue and saturation value of any color to either the shadows, the midtones, or the highlights. You can then also change the luminance by changing this slider down here. And you can even change the balance or the blending. However, I really wouldn't do that. I would mostly just stick to the color wheels. All right, so now that we know what each of the color settings do, it's time to edit the color settings. So for the temperature of this picture, I want it to be quite warm, so I'm going to turn this value all the way up to 6,847. For the tint, it's looking like there's a lot of green in the image. So what I would like to do here is turn this value up to around 29. So you can see it blots out quite a lot of that green in the background and makes it appear more natural, just so there's not too much green, but there's not too much magenta either. I also want this image to be quite vibrant looking, seeing as it is quite a colorful scenery, so I'm going to turn the vibrancy up to a value of +14. However, because I don't want it to be too oversaturated, I am going to turn the saturation down to -9. And now moving on to the color mix, the first color I'm going to affect is the red color, because I know that it won't really affect the chest here as much as the orange will, but it will affect it slightly, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to turn the hue down to a value of -55, and this will change that slightly. And I'm going to turn the luminance down all the way to -76. And this causes this to just darken slightly, but we will adjust it more when we now change the orange. So for the orange, I am going to affect the hue by turning it down to -28, and this is going to turn it into more of a true red. I am going to turn up the saturation to +35, and this will give it a nice, vibrant, saturated look. And I am also going to affect the luminance by turning it down slightly to a value of -6. All right, now, the final thing that we have to do for the color section is the color grading. This is my favorite part. So open up the color grading tab and you will see your color wheels here, shadows, midtones, and highlights. The first thing I'm going to do is affect the shadows. So I'm going to turn the hue to 196, and then I'm going to set the saturation to 23. So it's quite subtle, but it does add a nice effect there. Now for the midtones, instead of using a blue, I'm going to use the opposite end of the color wheel, which is yellow. I typically find that yellow and blue complement each other quite well in an image, so the midtones are going to be yellow. I'm going to set the hue value on the midtones to 57, and I'm going to change the saturation to 32. And now, finally, for the highlights, I am going to do the best of both worlds in that I'm going to add a slightly purple hue. So I'm going to move this hue value to 269, and I'm going to set the saturation to 28. So if you want to see the original image without any of the edits put on it, it's quite simple to do that, and all you have to do is click on the left / key. You will see at the bottom that it says showing original, and then simply let go of the key and it will show all the edits that we've put on it already. You can see already this image is looking quite good. Now, the next thing I like to do is crop my image. Come over here to the right hand side and click on the crop and rotate button, and you will see barriers appear around your image here. You will see a setting at the top that says aspect ratio. Typically, I would leave this on custom because I like to do my own cropping. And you will also see a setting that says crop overlay, and I like to leave this on thirds. So I'm going to crop my image by moving the right barrier over, like this. And I want to have it so that the robin's eye is on the thirds line. It's a very simple rule to follow, and where the third lines intersect is what are known as the rule of thirds points. And I'm going to crop up from the bottom here so that it's more direct and on the thirds line. So that's pretty much our cropping process done. Now, the next thing I like to do in my photo editing process is denoise my image. Typically, it depends on what kind of camera that you're using, but this little FZ80 here, because the sensor on it is so small, it's quite noisy. So I have to denoise my images every time I'm editing photos off of it. So come down to the detail tab and you will see a whole bunch of different settings pop up here. Sharpening is pretty obvious. It allows you to sharpen your image and get a more jagged appearance out of it, but typically you want to be more conservative with this setting too, because over sharpening your image can create pretty bad looking artifacts that you don't really want. And the luminance value here is your actual denoising setting. So you can see if I turn it up and then leave it for a few seconds, you can see that the image gets quite denoised. So for this, I'm going to be quite conservative with how much I turn my sharpness up, but I am going to turn it up slightly to 50. And this radius setting here is quite interesting. Now, for these pictures, I like to turn it up to a value of 2.0. I don't really know what the radius setting fully does, but it just makes my photos look sort of more detailed and more pleasing to the eye, for me personally. So I turn that up to 2.0. And now for the luminance, I'm going to turn this up to 60. And you can see there that this image now looks much, much better. It looks much cleaner, it's much more pleasing to the eye, and it looks a lot more presentable if you were to actually go and post it anywhere. All right, now that we've got that finished, the next stage is masking. This is one of my personal favorite stages because it allows you to bring out the subject and select anything that you want in the photo and edit it to your liking without affecting anything else in the background. So first, click on the masking button, second from the bottom. Then click on the subject button. This will allow Lightroom to automatically detect the prominent subject in your photo. For wildlife photos, it's always a good idea to bring the focus to the animal itself. So you can see Lightroom here has properly detected that yes, this is the subject of the photo, but it has done it slightly wrong, as it does tend to. It's detected this branch here as being a part of the subject when in reality it isn't. But that's no problem, it's quite easy to remove. Simply click on the subtract button and then click on the brush button. And what this is going to allow you to do is remove any part of the selected mask without affecting anywhere else in the mask or the picture. And there we go. You can see now we have completely removed the stick from the subject part of the image, but that's not the only thing that I want to do. If you look down here towards the robin's feet, you can see that Lightroom hasn't properly detected them as a part of the subject. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to press on Add, and I am going to use a brush mask once again, and this time we're going to do it over the feet. Alright, now we've got that all properly masked up, it's time to begin editing the mask itself and bringing the subject to the forefront of the picture. So firstly, what you want to do is click on the subject mask that you created and open up the light category. Now I want to add extra contrast to the robin, so I'm going to turn the value all the way up to plus 46. And that gets the robin looking all contrasty. I'm also going to turn the highlights up, so I'm going to turn this value up to 48. I'm also going to turn the shadows down to a value of minus 33, and what this helps to do is just add more contrast to the image. As I already said, I like my images to be quite contrasty. I'm also going to turn the white value down slightly by a value of minus 9. And that's all I'm doing for the light settings. It's time to move on to color. I'm going to turn the temperature value down by a value of minus 10. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to make the robin stand out more. You see, beforehand it looked a bit warm in the shot, so turning down the temperature value on its own mask will just help it to stand out more in the picture, which is exactly what you want because it's the subject. I'm also going to turn the tint up on the robin slightly, and this again just helps it to stand out more. I'm going to leave the hue alone here. I don't really think I need to adjust the hue in any way. And the saturation I'm going to turn up to plus 9. Now another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the effects tab and I'm going to add texture to the robin mask. And the reason I'm doing this is because the texture just helps to, again, bring out the subject more, but it helps to, I feel, add more detail, which will help it stand out in the picture. And I'm going to turn this value all the way up to a value of 48. All right, and that is us about finished with the robin mask, but that's not the only mask that I want to do. I also want to create a mask around the robin's eye. So again, come down to the masking tab, click on create new mask, and then click on brush. And now I'm going to mask over the robin's eye. Now we have the eye masked over, it's time to edit. First, come into your light tab, and the first thing that I want for this mask is the exposure to be slightly up. So I'm going to turn it up to a value of 0.76. The next thing, which will also help to bring out the eye, is by affecting the contrast setting. And I'm going to turn this down to minus 59. I'm also going to turn the highlights all the way up, because that will help to bring them out more on the eye. And the final thing I'm going to affect for this mask's light settings is the whites. I'm going to turn this value up to 47. And there we go. Our eye is looking nice and shiny. The final thing I'm going to affect is, because the eye looks quite cool, I'm going to turn up the temperature value of it to +29. And that just helps to reduce the blues and make it appear more natural in line with the rest of the photo. And now the final mask that I want to do is a radial gradient on the chest of the robin to help bring out more of the highlights around there. So again, come to your mask tab, click on Create New Mask, and then click on Radial Gradient. And then draw out a small enough mask here, it's going to be circular, and then drag it down to where you want that mask to be placed. In this case, I'm dragging it down onto the robin's chest. And what I'm going to do here is just quite simply turn up the highlights by a value of 80. Now, the last things that I want to do are just add a few little finishing touches. Come down to the Effects tab and you will see a few settings pop up, similar to how we saw them in the mask: texture, clarity, dehaze, and vignette. And I want to add a slight vignette to this picture. So I'm going to use a vignette value of -26, and then click on this side-facing arrow to bring the drop-down menu. I'm going to change the midpoint so that it's not as far in the center. The midpoint simply just changes where the vignette's midpoint is. It's quite self-explanatory. I'm going to change this setting to 61. I'm also going to change the clarity of the image. Now, clarity is a bit of a weird setting. It basically adds more contrast on the edges of pixels. I don't really know how else to properly explain that, but it does improve the look of your image if it's something that you want to add. So I'm going to add a slight value of it, 15. And I'm also going to reduce the dehazing of the image. Now, the dehazing setting is another quite self-explanatory setting. You wouldn't really use this on pictures like this. However, this is just to help regain some lost detail in the image. So I'm going to turn this value down by 15. Now, again, you can go back and see your original photo at any time that you want to by simply clicking on the left slash and seeing the original, and then lifting your finger from it and seeing all the edits that you've applied to your picture. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to be doing, because I forgot to show this earlier on in the video, is I'm actually going to further change the color mixing settings. So come out of your Effects tab and come back into your Color tab, and the mixes that I'm going to be changing are the green and the dark blue. So starting off with the green, I'm going to turn the hue up by +41. And the reason I'm doing this is to make the background greens appear more truly green. I feel like they looked a bit yellow beforehand. I'm also going to increase the saturation by +18, and I'm going to turn the luminance down by -37. And now, moving on to the dark blue setting, I'm going to turn the hue up by +33, and the reason I'm doing this is because it's going to affect this small band here along the side of the robin and make it appear a richer blue color. I'm also going to turn the saturation up by +25, and I'm going to turn the luminance down slightly by -9. And now, the final thing that I want to do is I want to add a color profile to the image. So at the top here, you'll see a setting that says Profile. Click on that and you'll see a small drop down appear with many different color profiles that you can pick from. Because this image is more akin to a portrait style, I'm going to use Adobe Portrait. And there we go. The photo is now finished. If you did follow along with this, I do hope you enjoyed, and I also hope you learned something. One final closing note, do remember that everything I've taught you here can be applied to all types of photos, not just wildlife photos. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.